Okay, it's July 27th, Knowledge Engineering 23. Thanks, Tom and Peter, for joining. We have some notes that Chris has sent asynchronously, or we can discuss anything else that would be interesting.
Yep. I'm always good. Go on, Tom.
I can mention, I picked up a book that seems a little off the beaten track maybe, but I found it to be very interesting. It's called Sorting Things Out, Classification and Its Consequences. Because I've done some work trying to classify systems, and it seems like that's one of the things we need to do, starting with what a system itself is and what are the subtypes. And I found some interesting things in here. One was related to the naming issue. And when I've done modeling for business where somebody was paying me, there was always a naming problem. And I'm sure you've run into it. No matter what you try to name, people have multiple names for it, or they don't agree with the name and the definition that's associated with the name. Well, this talks about how there's many sort of communities dealing with things, and they all have a different worldview. And the names come from the worldview. So it's not just a naming issue when you have a collision of names, it's like a worldview issue. So it seems to me, rather than just coming up with a semantics and unique names, it's really a deeper worldview issue, coming up with a worldview.
Very
And
much so.
there can, of course, be multiple worldviews. There's hopefully only one set of facts, but there's multiple ways to view them and perspectives to see them from. So that was one thing. The other one was about the problems of trying to capture a lot of knowledge. And one is the data entry problem. And I've sort of hit that with the systems common model that I have. It takes a lot to put data in. And once you have it in, if you're checking for accuracy or for coherence, it gets harder and harder to do. It takes more and more time. And you can sort of eventually run out, get to the point where it's maybe not maintainable, not because it's not adaptable, but because there's not enough time and energy to keep up with it. So that's something I've been thinking about a bit.
Let me add, and I don't know if you've covered this while I've been away, but one of the key things I'd like to see addressed as soon as possible is Tom has created his model, and we have it on the ISSS website, and he's updating it, and we'll do another update at some point. But he has used the software that he has, and we've talked about transferability or maintenance when Tom is not able to do that anymore. And I would like to have a ISSS plan, as it were, to work with Tom to find a way to access the XML and import it into some other modeling language, or to get a copy of the software that Tom has so that we can continue to develop it over time.
Yeah, and I owe you two things, and I'm working on them. One is a update, because the one on our website's about 1.5 years old, and the other one is a standardized copy of the model. It's in UML, and there is a UML standard. I think it's called XML. And I tested that out with Bruce. I did a small model and I converted it to XMI. I sent it to him, and he was able to imported into his different modeling tool. So you gave me a pointer to a place in the cloud. I'm going to put a copy there, and maybe we can get somebody else to access it then, just to see that it works.
I think this interoperability is crucial, and I think it's something this group could certainly be aware of, if not promote, is the interoperability of models that concern system science, knowledge engineering on system science. And Daniel, I'd ask you to help think about that with us, and we could get Bruce on here, or get to know more about the model or the software that Bruce was using, or I think he told me about it once. I forget what it's called. It's like $1,200 or something. But anyway, I don't know if there's an open source software that would be ideal, Tom. Or Daniel.
The one I have is one that I used in industry from about 10 years ago. And right. I pay a couple $100 fee to IBM each year for support for it. So it's pretty expensive. Probably not the best one for general use.
What was it called? Relational, just for the purposes of record keeping?
Rational System Architect, and now they've added design to it. System Architecture and Design, RSAD. Okay. I'm only using a small portion of it. It's a huge tool.
Well, when you update the exported model for HTML, maybe if there's a way to export the RSAD file, we could have that as part of the record as well, up in
yes,
a shared space.
Absolutely.
So I'll send you the link to the Google place where we've been uploading your models, so I can do that again, and make a request to you to upload whatever the file is in RSAD, so that at least we've got that as well. And even the URL. So, I mean, that's three things, isn't it? It's the RSAD source file. It's the HTML export that I can put up on the web to replace what's currently there. And it's the UML export that might be available to anybody else. And I think if we had those three files, then we're ensuring that we've done the best we can today.
Okay. That makes sense.
Good.
Yeah. Well, on this more on the interrupt. Well, nice. Good. Out of the gates with the big knowledge engineering questions, naming, entry. I mean, these are the stages of just the process-based stages of the entire apparatus. And then like kind of the exit is the interoperability, because we're not just talking about like an outcome product. You want to be able to take the whole system and use it in a different way. I'm pretty familiar with that from the Academic Institute with text encoding, and kind of like textual scholarship and long-term thinking around like interoperability of text, which seems like it would be really trivial, but it's actually like not, especially if you're dealing with large corpus and complex metadata and all that. But this, I mean, as soon as we can see this format, then let's just jump on it, even if it's only a exemplar output, and then we can, I guess, ideally of the UML. The UML preserves all the information of the RSAD, or is there something that's lost in the RSAD to UML?
I'm not totally sure, but I would guess it's everything, or maybe just some minor things that are lost.
Like layout or something.
Yes, maybe some cosmetic things with the layout.
Okay.
You
Well, yeah,
might
as soon
want
as
to, you might want to put the link to the ISSS display of Tom's model, which I just put in the chat,
okay.
just for a point of reference.
Oh, wait, I don't see it in the chat.
You don't? Oh, no, you do now.
Okay. Yeah, yep.
Sorry, it's me. Yeah, by the way, I would like to have feedback on the model. There's lots of things that can be done. And again, the problem you eventually run into is too many things to do and too little time and energy. So if it was carried forward, it would have to get other people involved. People
That's
could
always
work
a,
on
yeah,
specific area of expertise.
it's always a challenge in a volunteer organization. If we got a multi-million-dollar grant, we could employ people and proceed in a different way. But volunteers on this kind of thing is always a challenge.
One approach that's not necessarily our choice today, but we're applying for this grant in 1 month. Pathways to enable open source ecosystems. It's a pretty interesting program. There's basically 2 routes or 2 like lanes. Phase 1 is about scoping an open source ecosystem. It's a smaller grant, 1 year, and that's like and phase 2 is kind of supporting and scaffolding what already exists. But it's like if there's enough interest for people to really think of it as the system science ecosystem, and there was some comprehensivity around what that meant in terms of education, knowledge engineering, and other areas, but just from where we are, those 2, then that could actually be supported as such. Of course,
I
there's
like that
also like
idea.
or organization level grants, but then you have to say, oh, we're the coolest organization, and we have best. But I think the ecosystem positioning.
It's a very attractive idea. I hadn't thought about that. I'm willing to take that on. Because you're doing your thing anyway, aren't you? You're putting one of those in. Right.
Yes, we are.
So, I mean, you weren't proposing you would add this into your proposal, were you?
No, I think it would be
No.
a future cycle for sure.
Right.
But in 1 year from now.
Right. But I mean, it is something that I could even work with Tom to look at. Tom could look at this, and he and I could, well, and you, Daniel, but I mean, if I wanted to pursue this, to flesh out the content and make some initial effort, even to propose it or something, get some feedback, and to encourage the conversation, that would be an enormous step forward. Possibly.
Yeah.
I would like to better understand what you mean by ecology.
You'd have to read the NSF proposal.
I'll
Right.
bring in an image that just from another document.
Because when I started the model, I decided to split into 2. The one I'm really interested in is modeling systems, and not systems. The whole universe is system oriented. And I started with, things like atoms and molecules and worked up, and system was the most general item at the very top. But I needed a lot of information for that, which I saw as a different set of information. So that's where Systems Common came from. And that's mostly factual information, like people, their names and dates of birth and documents and quotations and organizations and so on. It's all non-controversial, but it provides the information that you need to find the information for the model of the universe. So I'm wondering if you see it split up that way, or
Let me just address how they're seeing it, because I think the question of ecosystems is certainly a rich question. But here's how they see it: is basically, yeah, there's an open source product which is produced by scientists. This is, I mean, and so I think that's the question: what is the product of systems science? And that may be knowledge product, but also it may include software, may include knowledge repositories like yours, education. Like in our work with active inference, we have multiple products, but they include like education, research, service, governance. And then the grants is proposed to bring all of these other more holistic, not comprehensively, but just the ones that are shown here. Other aspects where like the ecosystem needs that, like, and then here's one other view. The other image they have is you propose a managing organization. So then the ISSS, let's just say, says we're going to be a managing organization to catalyze the system science ecosystem, which means articulating between the developers and the users, and help support like a more accessible and inclusive ecosystem that's just more effective, more aligned, safer. So that's kind of how they're seeing it in this proposal, but also it reflects a somewhat different direction. It's the second year of the program, and it is under the TIP directorate, which is a new directorate under the NSF.
Hmm.
So I don't know all the implications of that, but clearly they're looking for things that are, modern and useful.
so something's been submitted for grant for this?
No, we're on our work with another project. We are doing this right now. That's how I know about it.
Daniel is doing it in
Yeah.
his in his full-time work
Yeah.
situation, not his VP of education for ISSS work.
Yeah.
The
I'll put the
AII.
link in the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah. But whether that program's the right one or just more generally, I just have found already that thinking about if it's going to be open source and it's going to be ecosystemic, I mean, it taps into the biomimicry. It helps bring it has system in it. So it's like I think a good way to and then it helps contextualize what is knowledge engineering doing. We don't have a supervisor. No one's telling us like what to do. We're not within a single organizational setting per se. Even though we're in the ISSS, like
That's true.
the users are outside of the ISSS. So we're like here, system scientist, knowledge engineering front end, and then some limited number of external users, external to the ISSS, or external to the people who are making the work. But then it's like, do we have these things? What would we're informal right now, and not everything has to go this way, but like all these questions about like long-term stability and reliability of the knowledge resource. It's kind of like, is it going to be diligently pursued to be an intergenerational effort? Because if it's kind of like half, then it's going to be just like a more of the rolling kind of tragedy and loss that we already have. But it's hard to get people to step up to that level of commitment. However, specific funding opportunities are, I think, one of those bootstrap pathways. Okay, but just on this, Tom, you will update Peter and then and maybe I, or we can just talk about this at a future time once you've done this.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping to do it soon. I've been talking about this with Peter for several months, so I think I have it at a place where I can release it, and it shouldn't take me long to do the other thing, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll get it out there.
Cool. Cool.
And
Okay.
I would appreciate any kind of feedback.
Yeah. Cool.
I should just mention I have some experience with AI, but it's probably far out of date at this point. Haven't worked with ChatGPT, though some of my friends have and have sent me stuff. Looks very interesting. But I had a degree in computer science, and I actually did some work with expert systems. I'm not at all an expert in AI, but I have some experience.
Well, certainly
I
it's
don't.
been a topic of conversation here tangentially about ChatGPT and large language models in general, because the model you have and all of the collected resources we have on the ISSS website are there for people to learn from, and the more accessible they are, the better. And if we found a way to build our own large language model, it would be a way of interfacing to all of our collective resources.
Yeah, and the multimedia like kind of like deployable solutions, they're just so rapidly improving. Like what's a custom job today will not be a custom job tomorrow. And being able to point out a change. So that's why having and that was always recognized as the first stage, was to gain awareness and then try to archive and index as much of the ISSS content as possible. Of course, Rob's work to that end was the most helpful, because once we can really clearly address the corpus, then then more and more opportunities will arise for like all these different, the conversational component, the search component, all these other features. One other fun just kind of other project that I'm working on with a friend, we're breaking up scientific papers into multiple lengths. So like you could break a paper into every sentence or every word, or just paper as one block. And then use a language model to generate a vector embedding for that text. So not using generativity, but just asking in the high dimensional space of the language model, where is that text? So, car and vehicle are going to be closed semantic space, because that's what this is, the whole semantic space conversations. And then we're going to try to look across historical papers and modern discourse, and then look at like not the citation patterns through time, but rather the semantic space movements and influences. So you might have two different fields that are like, in this semantic neighborhood and that semantic neighborhood. And then a new paper arises that has a paragraph that has a semantic embedding that's intermediate. And maybe one of the sentences is over in this neighborhood and the next sentence is in that one. And then the third sentence is intermediate. And so the whole paragraph is intermediate. And that represents like the semantics of the interdisciplinary synthesis. But that paper may not be cited by future work in that neighborhood. They may have just read it and then not cited it, so it wasn't reflected in the bibliography, which is always very limited and only to the official literature. Or they may have literally not read it, but it still represents the earliest work on a given intersection. So I think that that is like that would just ultra modernize, where just like we've looked at before with the interface and all the topics that are being discussed, the things people are still talking about, yet they're not cited and they're not necessarily searched for. So we could use this kind of like more granular semantic analysis to show the reach and the scope of systems.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something I've come across not too long ago. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's finding relationships in the literature where A is related to B, or it finds A is related to B and C is related to B, so there's an assumed relationship between A and C. And there's a name for it, and there's somebody that developed it. I'll be able to dig it up probably. But it's from well before artificial intelligence. I'm not quite sure what the basic science behind it is, but it just sounds similar to what you're describing. Probably not nearly as sophisticated.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing. A lot of this was latent and laid out. And now this helps us. Now it's a lot more accessible. It also just made me think, right before we started, we were talking about visualization and stuff. Like, if we could visualize like a stack of books, here's the ISSS archives, like all these books on the shelf, the yearbooks and Tom's work and this person's work, and then here's like another bookshelf. Here's George's work, all of but things that are not within the ISSS organization per se, but like works that we think are relevant, and that could just be drawn from the Systems Community Alliance registers, and then on top of the bookshelves, we could like show different paths. Like you could search for scholarship, you could chat out of curiosity, and then just like make it clearer how we have to build this foundation with the primary materials so that we can enable all of these directions, because it seems clear once for those who understand it, but also like kind of rallying the team for like a librarian's task. Most people don't feel that call, but we need people to hear that call. And it's not just about the books either. It's also about the intergenerational learning and like doing what we can now. But then that is
I have something along that lines in Systems Common. So I started putting links into the web for various purposes. A lot of people, if they have a Wikipedia entry, there's a link to a Wikipedia entry. So with one, if you have a diagram with the person on, if you want to know more about the person, one click gets you to Wikipedia and you can read whatever, and there's always links there to go further. But I noticed that a lot of documents are available online for free. So I have documents stereotyped if they're online, and I provide a link to the online version. So then I put a collection of these that are online together in one diagram. So if you're looking for online documents, you can just go there and browse through them. Then I have a section of classics. I don't have too much in there, like James Miller and Von Bertalanffy and some of the luminaries, and a lot of their stuff is online. So I have a section with the classics. Now, it's my opinion of what the classics are, and that's an issue who decides what's classic, but I'm more or less testing it out now. And I can imagine how you could do a string or a thread of books to read. You know, start with this one, and then if you're interested in such and such a subject, go to this one, or then go to that one. And if they're online, you could just click and pull it up and read it. So I could see how that could be turned into a primer or the beginnings of one. And again, going back to the elicitation, if it was out there and people started to use it, they would give feedback on how to make it better or add something that they think is a classic that you don't have. So I see a lot of development that could be there with not too much work, because I have many of the documents already there and the people. So anyway, that's something to look at. I'm not sure the current version, how much it has. It might have one with online documents, but probably doesn't have the classics. So that's one of the issues that I ran into. I recognized the challenge that would be if you start putting opinion or your worldview in, because there's always differences about that. So I started with factual, non-controversial things. And so I've tried to keep away from putting comments in. Actually, I have something called notes, but I have it separate from what's public model, where I've experimented with putting notes in where it says what the note is and who put it in and when it was put in, and you can link it to anything else in the model. So I'm not sure that would work on a large scale, but one of the things I thought about.
Yeah, like, well, certainly once we have, well, this is an HTML file. Basically, this is just it outputs a big HTML, and then that's what renders this site. Or is there more custom work between the export and this? Tom, like, does this HTML
yes.
file like literally load up this way?
Yes, it's really better to come through the menu. So if you just go back, keep returning to the menu. Okay, click on Systems Common in the blue.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, there you go. And then you can slide the boundary over to the left, because you don't need anything on the far left column. Gives you more
Which boundary?
space.
Oh,
The one just that one, yeah.
all right.
Then you
I
have
like
more
seeing
space.
that. Okay.
So if
Is
you
this
go to,
is this
yeah,
HTML?
actually, I do have classics under documents.
Is this
Classics.
HTML rendered though? All
There's only a few of those, but I just wanted to show the possibility. So if you click on Wikipedia, for example, we'll go right to the Wikipedia entry, or so there's a lot more that could be done with that. That's just sort of showing what's possible. Try clicking on one of those, yeah. Yeah. Brings it up.
wow. But is
So
this
part of it
entire?
is
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Forgot the term I was going to use now. A place where you can go, which provides links to a lot of other things. It sort of pulls together all the stuff that's on the web.
No.
Sort of a directory, I guess, or
But is this entire HTML website rendered as an export from RSAD?
It can be, yes.
But like, what generates this clickable interface?
Well, when I build the model, I can put a URL. I can associate with just about any type of object, a UML, and then I show it like this in pink just to make it stand out that it's a link out of my website,
But
into wherever.
but the UML doesn't have the code to render this website. The UML is
No,
just
it's
the underlying information. So where does the HTML formatting come
the
from?
tool.
Oh,
You work in UML, and there's a tool specific file that holds the model, and then there's a capability to convert that into HTML, all of it or parts of it, into UML, and have a separate file. Separately from that, you can export UML into a standard UML format, and any tool should be able to read that. I would think by now pretty much any tool in the market would support the standard UML. So it could be exported, and it might look a little different in a different tool, but it would have the same basic information.
okay. We'll continue this when we see the exports. Let me just show in our last little bit what, or unless you want to bring up anything else, or I'll show what Chris has added.
There's a tour from the main menu. I think it's in this version. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Go back to the main menu.
Tour?
Yes, tour 1, and it links to tour 2, which shows some examples of what's in there. So this is simple people and text about them, documents and books, links, author links, quotation links, organizations. Now, every one of those is defined in a quote repository, like a database. And then there's views, which are diagrams that show them. So for example, this is a biosemiotics field, which I got interested at one point. And it's another one of those communities that has a lot of good information that I think systems people generally are not aware of. And by the way, another one that I just attended a conference last week was Big History. And Tyler Volk is a member, if you're familiar with him. And they look at the big picture too, not so much in terms of systems, but there's a lot of good information there. So I could see a use of something that shows in general what the field is. Who are the main people? Who are the main concepts? What are the main concepts? What are the organizations? And so on. So this was an example of that. If you go on, I have some other bigger, larger ones to show you what's possible. Oh, this is an influence.
This is cool.
Now, one of my heroes was Russell Ackoff. I went attended Penn, and I also knew Gary Shadagi. Both of them were ex-presidents. Peter might be familiar with some of them. And I learned a lot from Ackoff about Churchman. And then at some point I read about Singer, and I saw there was these were all interconnected, influenced each other. And Singer was at Harvard and was taught by William James. So this is a way to show how this whole group got connected and influenced each other. So again, it's showing a possibility.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's look at what Chris added in the last bit.
So there's a lot of data points, but the real benefit seems to come from connecting them.
Definitely.
So I always think about integration and unification, generalization. Seems like that's where the knowledge comes from. We have to get everything, put it together to be able to do that.
Well, that's part of the intent of the whole 60 years of the society. So,
Okay. So Chris wrote, okay, found a few collections of tools. Oh yeah, good. Oh, I thought it hurts me. Okay. Okay. But I don't even remember what they all do. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny and shows how fast it's going. Like this was using the OpenAI API. But now Coda has has the AI. So now we can just directly go to new column, AI, summarize at paragraph length, one sentence.
Yeah.
Edit AI. So this is with reference earlier to the vector embeddings in the semantic neighborhood. So then it's like, okay, so it's taking the model's taking in the text and then finding the location of that prompt in the space, and then generating is basically just continuing to generate text in that neighborhood and a few other things, but that's the basic idea. So then like you could say summarize it, and yet the summary could be longer than the input. There's no reason why it has to be. Now Coda has probably trained it so that it doesn't do such things. But if instead of the prompt being summarize, if it were like elaborate on, then we get longer texts.
Can you specify in any way where the data comes from, or does it just take whatever the whole biggest pot of data it has?
So within one language model, it's just going to query its whole semantic field. However, there's basically two alternatives. So there's more, but the main two alternatives. The first is you have a language model that's explicitly connected to the internet. So, for example, Perplexity, like here, this is explicitly doing a web search. So here, these are the actual sources that it used. So it pinged the website, queried the information, summarized the information. That's one approach. And the second approach, which is the one that we're also very excited about, is like the more mixture of models or multi-agent simulations. And so in those situations, you have kind of like a dispatch agent or like a metacognitive agent that then makes more specialized calls based upon what is relevant. So the prompt for the metacognizer would be like, given the prompt from the user, determine which one of your contacts you should ask about this. So that it can route different requests so that there doesn't need to be one model that just all blurred together. But once you start getting modularity amongst models and the ability to query the internet, it's all in play.
Yes, you could filter it by how you ask the question too, I would guess.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get to his questions. Okay. Are there other places? That's the information on language models. I was not sure if there's good voice to text capability in Coda.
Can you test it out?
I just don't think there is. I don't think there is audio.
Okay.
Now, I don't think it's out of the possibility space. I've just never seen it. Yeah. I'd have to see. Coda has these packs, these like add-ons. This one's free, I guess. Maybe I'll. That's very promising. If it is possible, but it looks like it needs a little bit of setup and a few other things. But certainly that will exist. Well, so I'll say we don't have speech to text going in Coda right now. Yeah. Actually, this was just so we use assembly AI for our transcription work. And they just released this, I think, like literally in the last several days. I'm putting in the quantum information. So we'll come back in a few minutes. Okay. Voice to text. Well, one approach we can say is Lemur. Otter AI. And then
Word processors these days take dictation. I know Word does.
yeah.
So that converts. And
Yeah.
I've experimented a little bit. I found it does a pretty good job.
Yeah. For standard use, word processor, Google Docs. Yeah, then if you want to upload a file, that's where you need to engage these other tools. Yeah, I hope that's useful for you, Chris.
I owe Chris an email. He and I were talking about focusing on a SIG, doing some work. I need to do that.
Okay, so I just brought in the Chris Fields video about quantum information. Okay. Well, maybe the app is not. Not sure, but the transcript looks good. Transcript looks very good. Yeah. Again, hence why it's important to like get the primary audio materials, because it's going to be just totally trivial to drop them in. But if we don't have them, then we're going to be scrambling for the primary materials, text and audio, video, while who knows what. But it's like, we know we want that primary materials. And again, that is Rob's work with SCA. So that's why I just want to help him and get the ISSS materials secured, because just having them addressable is going to be transformative, let alone even using a tool, but just having them, knowing that they're going to be there. Any other thoughts?
Now, can you put the link to both the knowledge engineering coder and the education one?
Link to the knowledge engineering and to education
Coder on the in the chat just quickly.
Yep, there's knowledge engineering. There's education. And whenever you're ready to take over the documents with like a different email address, or whoever will be doing that, then we'll do it.
Jen McCarr will contact you, because I've retired or resigned myself from web admin at ISSS.org, but I have said I'm interested in continuing to support this project and, you know, many others, but I don't want to have overall responsibility for the whole web admin. So Jen McCarr wants to be back in touch with you, Daniel, to chat about that a little bit.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Tom.
fellows.
Thanks, Daniel.
See you next time. Oh, actually, one note. The next 2 weeks we won't have a meeting.
Okay.
Because
you're on vacation.
I think next week I'm gonna be just traveling, but next week I'm gonna be traveling, and then in 2 weeks from now, isn't it the board meeting?
I don't know.
Okay, I believe it is. So
Okay.
I'll try to send out an email to that extent. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Daniel.
Yes.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tom.
So we'll
Be in
probably
touch.
be meeting again in 4 weeks then.
Yeah.
3 or 4 weeks. I mean,
But you'll
you could
send
come
something out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the calendar
Okay.
event will always be the accurate place.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay,
See ya.
thanks,
Bye.
guys.